Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to East Central Missouri and the world, and welcome to the James Strong Show podcast number 303. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for making us a part of your day. I appreciate it. This podcast was recorded on the evening of Sunday, February the 12th, from the James Strong Studio in Western St. Charles County. Just got back into town. Left on a Monday, came back this afternoon, and actually, there's a football game on right now. The Super Bowl's playing, but I thought, you know what? I really don't want to do that right now. I'd rather do a podcast. Talk about the week that I had to the West Coast. Left on a Monday, came back on a Sunday. So I was in Utah. I was in Arizona. I was in Southern California. I was in Tijuana all this week. So I entitled this podcast Westward Ho. And no, it's not about a prostitute from the West Coast. It's not about that at all. It's just about my trip out west, what I stumbled upon, what I looked for and found, how the West is changing a bit I've been going to the West Coast now for probably, the first time I went was 1977. So you tell me. I've been going for a long time, and there's been a lot of changes, and a lot of those changes seem to be accelerating, perhaps. I'm not sure if things are really changing more quickly. Maybe I'm changing quickly and they're affecting me more. Maybe I'm noticing them more because I'm more observant. I don't know, but change is happening. Actually, change is happening everywhere, of course, but especially on the West Coast. Is it good? Is it bad? Don't know. We'll find out after the change has taken place. But I'm going to talk about my trip to Utah, to Arizona, to Southern California, and to Tijuana. Before we do that, though, my podcast last week had to do about I touched on the Chinese spy balloon, okay? And I said, look, here's the timestamp for this, and here's what's going on, and here's what I think may be happening. Maybe this is what we should have done. Maybe this is what's going to happen. And I purposely timestamped that because I knew things would change, okay? So I'm purposely timestamping this one too. I'm talking about these balloons, and I'm not even going to say the Chinese balloons because it's plural, and we're not sure if they're from the Chinese, all of them. So the timestamp on this is Sunday, February the 12th at 6:53 p.m. So everything I'm about to say right here is as of that time, okay? Well, as I was on the West Coast, I heard these stories about, well, they found another balloon. They think it's a balloon. They think it's the Chinese. They shot it down. Then I heard a story that there was still another one. That second one was over Alaska. This one was over Canada, okay? And the Canadian government and the U.S. government both scrambled. The U.S. shot them down, and I think the Canadians said, yeah, go ahead and shoot it down. Translation, they didn't want to spend the money on the missile, okay? That's my commentary. But it's interesting what they're calling these. They're not calling them balloons. They're calling them objects that they're not going to identify. That's right. They're UFOs. Now, also, there was a story out of China this weekend about how there's also a UFO that appeared, like a balloon that appeared above one of their paper mills or near a port city. So, and with the Chinese, you never know. Is this a bunch of baloney to try to say, hey, this isn't us. See, they're doing it to us too. Are these simply Chinese spy balloons? Are they something else? Do they have to do with the UFOs, UAPs that some of the Navy and Air Force pilots have reported on lately? I don't know. The one interesting thing that I heard this afternoon was it was a U.S. Army official that said, yes, we do know what it is. but we're not saying. That, friends, was truly bizarre. And as I like to say, again, this is a 6:55 p.m. Central Standard Time on Sunday night, Sunday the 12th of February. What's going to happen later on? Don't know. Film at 11. That's what I like to say. We'll find out later. Okay, my West Coast trip, Westward Ho. I had a big business trip this week where it took me all over the place. Got up at dark 30. Actually, 3 o'clock in the morning is when I woke up on Monday morning, which is almost Sunday night, to catch a 5:50 flight out of St. Louis to to Salt Lake City through Denver. And got to Salt Lake City about 11 o'clock in the morning, okay? And Salt Lake City, lots of snow. I shouldn't say lots of snow. They had a lot of snow out there earlier, and it was snowing some out there. They had I want to say 2 inches of snow, which is not much for them. But the mountains were simply beautiful. The Wasatch Mountains, I think they're called out there in the Wasatch Valley there in Salt Lake City. Simply beautiful. Had to go see a customer north of Salt Lake City. In fact, it's real close to Proximity Point, where the Golden Spike was driven when the East and the West Railroads met. But Salt Lake City, if you've never been to it, is simply a beautiful, beautiful city. It's growing by leaps and bounds. And as I mentioned before, things in the West are changing. Salt Lake City may be changing big time really soon. And it has to do with that Great Salt Lake they have there. It's a landlocked lake, and it's drying up quickly. So much so that some experts say that within 2 years, it won't be a true lake. There'll be pieces of the lake with lots of dry area, a whole lot of dry area. So if you're, they don't really use it for much. A little bit of recreation. They have boats out there, etc. But here's the thing. That lake bed is full of toxic materials, and not just pollutants. I'm not talking about pollutants mainly. I'm talking about arsenic. I'm talking about lead and mercury, and that's from the mountains, okay? Because this is a lake that is a landlocked lake, these toxic chemicals, lead as well, lead, mercury, arsenic, and other heavy metals have just sat in the bottom of that lake for years and years and years. And if it dries up, all those chemicals will become airbound and blow into an area that has a population of about 2 million people. That, friends, will not be good. And I'm really not sure there's anything you can do about that. You can't I don't blame it on, in fact, nobody can blame it on global warming, smokestacks, or maybe you can blame it on global warming. You can blame it on climate change. How's that? Because as things change, lakes dry up and other lakes form and mountains raise and valleys fall and forests grow and prairies go away and prairies grow and forests go away. Things change with the climate, okay? One of them might be that the Great Salt Lake is going to dry up or mostly dry up. And then there's going to be a toxic sandstorm that's going to be a big deal for the people who live in the Wasatch Valley. But it's a beautiful city. Saw my customer up there on Monday afternoon, spent the night in Salt Lake City, got up early in the morning, and I flew to Phoenix. Had a customer to see in Phoenix, Arizona. And we got the warning from the airlines, from Southwest Airlines, saying, look, there may be big time trouble in Phoenix because the Super Bowl is going to be there. I didn't believe it. I thought, look, this is Tuesday. The Super Bowl is not until Sunday. There's not going to be a problem. And there really wasn't. The Phoenix airport was no busier than I had normally seen it. It was fairly busy, but I was really in and out quickly. I only had one customer to see. I've got two guys I normally see in the Phoenix area, but one of them is going through bankruptcy, so he's not going to buy anything from me anytime soon. So I just needed to see the one customer. So what did I do? I got in there in the morning, caught an Uber because he's just about 15 minutes, 20 minutes away from the airport. Caught an Uber. They dropped me off, did my sales call, picked up another Uber, went back to the airport, picked up my flight to Los Angeles, actually the Ontario airport, which is in the what they call the Inland Empire part of the LA metropolitan area, out there by in the mountains, in the close to the mountains, I should say. It used to be farmland. Now it's just houses and houses and more houses. And I spent the night in Ontario, California. Once upon a time, I didn't like Ontario, California, mainly because there were still a lot of cattle ranches out there. And so it smelled. It smelled like cow poo, okay? So that's why I didn't like Ontario. There are no more cattle ranches in Ontario. It's suburbia. Everything's new. It's clean. It's bright. It's shiny. It's really, to me, Ontario is cooler than LA proper because it's newer. It's cleaner. It's LA of the current, not LA of the past, okay? But the one thing that has changed with Ontario, because it's LA, but it's what they call the Inland Empire, where the suburbanites live, things were cheaper out there. And maybe they still are. But a room I used to be able to get for about $120, $130 a night was almost $200 a night. And that's just what it costs out there. It was expensive. I will say, though, two things that were a pleasant surprise out there in California. One of them was I picked up my rental car out there, and the rental car at first, rental cars have gotten expensive too, okay? This one was going to be a little bit more expensive because I had to pick it up in Ontario and drop it off in San Diego. So sometimes it's a little more expensive there, and they only let you pick up certain cars. Well, my car was a Mitsubishi Mirage, the tiniest Mitsubishi that they make. And at first I thought, what this is going to be awful. It's going to be terrible. The car was made in Thailand. Okay. I couldn't figure out how to work the air conditioning properly. But then after I figured it out, because it was a little different type of control than what I was used to, I found that the car was actually fairly responsive, had a lot of pep for a 1.2 liter engine. That's it, 1.2 liters, tiny engine. But the transmission was pretty good. Folks, I got close to 50 miles to the gallon with that car. And Mitsubishi Mirage, those are cheap cars, relatively speaking. I think you can get one for just like $12,000, something like that. And if you're getting close to 50 miles to the gallon, I mean, a Toyota Prius doesn't get much better than that at more than double the price. So for what I paid for it, or what you would pay for it, for what, when I rented it for, it did the job. It was very, pretty comfortable for a small car, and it got great gas mileage. I would consider that. In fact, let me put it this way. If you're in the market for a small car that doesn't cost much, that gets good gas mileage, and isn't too terribly ugly, it's not a good looking car, I would consider the Mitsubishi Mirage. The other thing that I did out there when I was in Ontario is I went to a restaurant called El Torito, and it had been a long day. I didn't feel like driving any place to dinner, but right across the street, I saw this El Torito. Well, it was kind of across the street. It was across U.S. Highway Interstate 10, which means I'm not walking, which means I'm driving, but it wasn't far. And it was Taco Tuesday at El Torito. I thought, you know what? What the heck? If I'm in Southern California, I'm going to go to a place that advertises Taco Tuesdays. And I had some of the best tacos for a reasonable price that I'd had in a long time. El Torito, it's a chain out there, but it was good. I enjoyed it. So nice leisurely dinner in Ontario. Got up the next morning, Wednesday morning, and the other thing about the Ontario, California area is I've got a lot of customers in that area. Only one of them is a major customer. The rest of them are small customers, but they were all within about 20 miles from each other. So I was able to see 5 people that day. Okay. One of them was kind of bittersweet, kind of sad. It was a customer I've had for a long, long time, over 20 years. He's been my customer, and they're closing down the plant. This customer makes they manufacture what I call meat diapers. Okay. What's a meat diaper, you ask? Well, a meat diaper is when you buy a steak and it comes in a styrofoam dish, but between the styrofoam dish and the piece of meat is a pad that absorbs the blood. That's a meat diaper, okay? That's what these people make. And they've been around for a long, long time. They're closing the plant. They're moving the plant actually to El Paso. But none of the people are moving to El Paso. Nobody in Los Angeles wants to move to El Paso. They're staying in LA. So I got to see some of my buddies for the last time, and which was happy but sad, a little bit jealous because both of my buddies there. So what are you going to do? I'm just going to retire. I said, you're younger than me. How can you retire? What the heck? Yeah, we'll figure it out. We'll figure it out. So I was sad to see the guys for the last time, a little jealous because they're retiring and I'm not. But also we started talking about some of the other guys that I used to call on. And, what about old such and such? He died. Ooh, what about old so-and-so? Yeah, he's dead too. So as I get older, not only are the people that I've worked with and associated with retiring, but they're dying too, which was a little bittersweet, a little sad for me, but everybody dies. Death is part of life, right? So anyway, I finished my calls in the LA area, and I drove down to San Diego, spent Wednesday night in San Diego, got up on Thursday morning, and went to Tijuana to see my customer down in Tijuana. And the customer down there, they're a big customer. I've been calling on them again for 20 years. One rendition or another, they've been bought and sold a couple of times, and somebody else just bought them recently. And again, most of my contacts there are gone, and they've gotten a new group of people. 1 or 2 guys are still there, but for the most part, they've gotten new people. Mostly young engineers. I had good meetings with them. I think I'm going to have a good relationship with these customers. But it was very interesting, the conversation that I had with them. We were talking about the economy. After we're done with business, we started talking about the economy. And it was the economy in San Diego, in Chula Vista, which is a suburb of San Diego, kind of between San Diego and Tijuana, and the Tijuana area itself. And I had mentioned that it's a big thing. I said, did you know that it was a big deal for Americans to move to Tijuana and live there because the rent is a whole lot cheaper? And you could see the very stoic looks on their faces. And they said, oh, yeah, we know about that. We hate those people. I said, really? Why do you hate them? They said, because they're Americans with good jobs in the U.S., and they come down here and they rent all the nice places. In fact, not only do they rent the nice places, but they pay more rent than we're willing to pay. So the price of rent in Tijuana is going up astronomically because the ugly Americans are moving into their area and ruining their city. I found that hilarious. And you think about it, because a lot of people in Southern California are complaining because the people from Tijuana are moving up into their area and ruining their city. Here's what I think is going on there. Because these people that I just met, they're not hateful people. And they said what they're saying because it affected their pocketbook. And it doesn't matter where you live. If you live in Midwestern U.S., East Central Missouri, if you live in Southern California, if you live in Baja California, things are tight, okay? Things always are. You're always looking to better your family. You're looking to buy a little bit more. You never want to pay as much as you think you need to, because the more you pay for the stuff that you have to have, the less that's left over for the stuff that you want to have. So if you pay all your money out in needs, there's nothing left for wants. And just like Americans being upset over the people from TJ coming up into Southern California, the people in TJ are upset about Americans coming down into TJ and living and working in the U.S. for better, more money and jacking up the rent. Here's what I think really goes on there, okay? And this isn't hate speak. I felt this way for a long time, by the way, and I've even mentioned it on a podcast or two. People are very comfortable with those most like them. And when somebody else moves into an area, into a neighborhood who's not like them, who is different, and most important, if things around them begin to change because they are different, people are automatically going to react negatively against those individuals. Does that make sense? Everybody looks poorly upon outsiders. And anymore, it's not people who look different from them. Once upon a time, it was a black and white thing, literally. Not so much anymore. I mean, the vast majority, if not all, of the Americans who are moving down to Tijuana are U.S. citizens of Mexican descent, maybe second generation, who actually, their folks were from TJ. And they go back there to visit their grandparents who still live there. And they speak the language and thought, you know what? I'll just live there because instead of paying $2,000 a month for a very small apartment in Chula Vista, I can pay $200 a month for something bigger in Tijuana. And I'll pocket $1,800 a month. Friends, if you pocket $1,800 a month, you can save a lot of money in a short period of time. And that's what's going on. Okay? But everybody looks poorly upon outsiders. When somebody that's an outsider that's different from them moves in and changes things, they're looked upon poorly. That's always been the case. That always will be the case. I don't think it's a race thing. It's a money thing. And as I've said many, many, many times, if you ever want to find out why things are the way they are, follow the money. Even back in, I'm going to make a statement here I'm going to catch some flack from this, but I think if you listen closely, you'll tend to agree with me. Back in the 1970s, maybe in the late 60s, into the 70s, into the 80s, in St. Louis County, St. Louis City, we had what was commonly known as white flight. You had a white neighborhood, black people moved into that neighborhood, and the white people automatically left. Okay. That was a thing. And a lot of people said it's because the white people didn't want to live next to black people and they were racist. I don't know that that was the case most of the time. And I'll tell you why. Because what did happen is as black people moved into white neighborhoods, their real estate values went down. And most people in working class neighborhoods, their number one asset was their house. And when that asset started to drop, they sold and left. Now, were some of them racist and they did not want to live next to somebody with a black face? Absolutely. But I don't think the majority of those people were any more racist than the people in Tijuana, because an outsider moved in, changed something about their neighborhood, and it affected their pocketbook. That's what I think was happening in the 60s, 70s, and 80s in St. Louis and many other areas. If you think I'm full of baloney, send me an email, jamesstrongshow@hotmail.com. But I think if you'll think about it hard, I think that you'll agree that I'm, if not spot on, at least partially spot on. I said this before, when I stay in San Diego, I love to stay in the Little Italy part of San Diego. And Little Italy is just that. It's a part of San Diego. that used to be primarily Italians and some Asians and some Portuguese. And the reason those three ethnicities stayed in that area is because they were the tuna fishermen. And San Diego, once upon a time, used to be a huge tuna fishing town. In fact, that's what it was. It was a tuna fishing town. Okay. Now, there is still tuna fishing that goes on in San Diego. I posted pictures on Facebook of the fresh fish market where they had fresh tuna that they caught the night before and were selling it for $4.50 a pound. That's right. I didn't stutter. $4.50 a pound for fresh tuna caught the night before. And you're thinking, okay, what's the catch, Strong? Well, there is a catch, sort of. In fact, one guy said, why didn't you bring some home with you? Well, because you had to buy the whole fish, okay? And most of them, in fact, the one I looked at was 49 pounds, okay? 49 pounds times $4.50. I mean, do the math. That's about $250 worth of fish, first of all. It's a lot of fish. It's still a good deal. But I don't think I could take a 49-pound tuna and pack it in my checked luggage back to St. Louis, okay? Don't think they'd let me do that. So, but I mean, it's Little Italy is extremely expensive, but things like that, not so much. I've said before that one day, perhaps, I'll spend time down there, a month or 2 or 3 a year. When it's cold here in St. Louis, I'll spend some time there. Actually looked at some places down there, and they were advertising efficiency studios, $1,700 a month. I thought, wow, okay, well, that's not bad. I looked at the address. It's right there in Little Italy. It's a nice area. So I went and looked at them. And they said, here, take the key and go on up and take a look at it. They held my driver's license to, I don't know, make sure I wouldn't run off with the key or whatever reason. And I went up into the room and friends, this studio apartment, and she mentioned to me, now this is one of the bigger ones, okay? So most of them were going to be a little smaller than this. I don't know how that could be possible. This room was about 10 by 12. That was it. There was a bed. There was room for a dresser. There was a countertop with a sink. I guess the sink there was enough room to put maybe a microwave and a coffee maker, maybe. And there was a little bathroom off to the side, and well, you had a sink. It would be doubled as your kitchen sink, doubled as your bathroom sink, okay? And you had a toilet and a shower. Again, this room was about 10 by 12, $1,700 a month. No stove, no dishwasher, no pantry to put dishes, nothing. And I asked him, I said, do you have any places with a kitchen? They said, oh, no, none of our places have kitchens. I said, what do you do if you want to cook a meal? They said, well, there's a community kitchen downstairs with several stoves. So you do your own cooking down there and you go down and wash your dishes. I thought, for $1,700 a month. Well, there's a reason why the area is beautiful. The area is beautiful. The weather is perfect. And there's a price to pay for that. There was a house for sale, and this was an old house. In fact, this was one of the old original houses from the neighborhood, built in 1880. I took a picture of it. Let me take a look at this thing. It was built in 1888. It's called the Cromwell home, okay? Beautiful little house. It's a 2-story with a little carport. I would say both stories together, you're looking at about 1,200 square feet. Yeah, that's small. Right on Union Street, which is a perfect address. This house was for sale for $1.6 million. And they'll get it. The house payment would be over $10,000 a month. Taxes were $1,700 a month on that house. I'm going to repeat that. The taxes on that house were $1,700 a month. Unbelievably expensive. But that's what you got. That's what you have in that part of San Diego. There's absolutely, positively no way you can afford to live there unless you're one of two things. Actually, one of three things. Unbelievably rich, okay? If you earn $250,000 a year, sure, you can afford to live there, okay? Number two, you're average Joe, but you live in one of those efficiency apartments, okay, where you don't have a kitchen. It's $1,700 a month for your rent, but that's it. Or, maybe you and a buddy get together and you have one that's a little bit more than that, okay? Or you have roommates, okay? Or there's a third way. There's a third way you can live in that area. And a lot of people have figured it out. You're gonna think that I'm being ignorant, rude, cold. You can be homeless. There's a lot of homeless that live there in that area. A lot. What's a lot? How many did I see? In the Wednesday night, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday morning, couple hundred. That's a lot, friends. That's a lot. And you can tell the ones that live on the street and the ones that don't, because they have all kinds of shelters for the homeless there. Okay. There's the homeless, and then there's the homeless. There are some that you can tell they're homeless, but they've had a bath. They're not hurting anybody, but you can tell that because it's 7:00 in the morning and they're walking around in old clothes that don't match. Yeah, they're homeless, but they're spending the night in the shelter. They're getting a shower. They just had breakfast. They're not a menace to society. I'll say that. And then there's the others. And again, call me unchristian because it's kind of an unchristian way to think. I'm not going to lie. But I was on a walk down in the Embarcadero, and I had a cup of coffee, which after you walk for a while with a cup of coffee, you got to get rid of the coffee, okay? And there was a public restroom right there at the Embarcadero. Now, my rule is to never, ever, ever use the public restrooms because you don't know what you're going to run into. Well, I had no choice. I was going to either use the public restroom and gamble or embarrass myself. So I went into the public restroom. And there was a homeless guy in there with his pants around his knees, drying his butt with the hand dryer. And I just thought, what the hell is this? What is this? So I left. After I used the urinal, I had to. And no, I did not wash my hands. I certainly wouldn't have dried them on a hairdryer, okay? I was walking the next day in a part of San Diego called Gaslamp. It's kind of between Little Italy and Petco Park, okay? And they close off the Gaslamp Quarter, 5th Street, which is the main drag at Gaslamp, kind of between was it G and First? I forget. There's an area they close it off to traffic, okay, and they have it like a walking market, and mainly it's restaurants and shops and that. It's kind of cool, okay. And there was another homeless guy there who just pulled down his pants and exposed himself. There's families walking around, okay. This guy just pulled down his pants and exposed himself. Now, I don't know what he was doing. Was he getting ready to take a dump on the street? Because, by the way, you've got to watch the sidewalk where you walk because there are large turds that are probably from people on the sidewalks. And I assume that's what this guy was getting ready to do. Now, I know we should be tolerant of others. We should be tolerant of those who are different from us. I'm not going to deny that. But friends, when you're drying your butt on an air dryer that's meant for your hands, or if you just pull your pants down in front of a bunch of people, the tolerance has to stop, because that's become insanity. And maybe these people are insane. And if they are, they need to be taken off the streets and helped. This evening, I had finished my book. I needed a new book, so I went up to the public library. And I saw a sign that made me stop and think and smile. A smile that I was glad to be back in the Midwest. I had spent enough time on the West Coast, the left coast, whatever you want to call it. The beauty is unbelievable in many places out there. But the way they go about things, I'm a Midwestern guy. And like I said, I saw this sign at the library. I saw 0 signs that said this in California. 0. I don't think I ever would, because it's something that's not in their vocabulary. If they had that sign out there, it would be called racist. It would be called uninclusive. It would just be against the law to have a sign like this. But this isn't a public library, okay? A government institution. It was 2 words, 2 short words that you used to see all the time and you still see out here, and you absolutely never see in California. What did the sign say, you ask? Come on, Strong. Stop with the buildup. Simple sign. It said, "No loitering." Don't hang around for no reason. We don't want you hanging around here. If you got business here, do your business and leave. We don't want you hanging around. We don't want you gathering for no reason. No loitering. Come to the library, pick up a book. No loitering. In California, you could pitch a tent next to that sign and live there, and no one would say a thing. That's the difference between the West Coast and the Midwest. Is it a good thing? Is it a bad thing? I don't know. It's a thing. And while I do believe we should be tolerant of others, we should always be tolerant of others. Tolerance only goes so far. Well, that's it. We're done. JamesStrongShow@hotmail.com. That's my email address. Send me your email. I will send you a link to the podcast upon publication so you can download it and listen to it at your leisure. Tell your friends, tell your families. I appreciate all the exposure that you give to the James Strong Show. Podcaster. I'm on Podcaster, Brad Hildebrand's Podcaster, PODCASTRR. You can hear me there. iHeartRadio, any place you get your podcast. Tune in. I'm every place you can think of. Spotify, just like Joe Rogan. I don't think they fired him yet, have they? No, not yet. Or any place else you get your podcasts. Well, that's it. I'm done. Until next time, this is James Strong saying adios.